And we're away. Hey, welcome to the podcast. I'm Rich Mellon and host of Trapping Inc. TV. Today, I have a very special guest from Alaska, and this is Mike Matney. And Mike is noted for his incredible fur products, and he's noted for special traps that he makes. But mostly, you're noted as being a trapper, and you've been a trapper for a very long time, Mike.
Yep. Yeah, I originally started trapping when I was about 8 or 9 years old. We had where I lived, we had a rock pile that was about 200 yards from the house that the wood rats would get into. And then the wood rats occasionally would get to the house. So my mother hired me to trap the wood rats out in the rock pile. So basically my trapping career started as ADC work, basically.
So wood rats.
That would have been in the middle of the 60s, about 65, 66, somewhere in there.
When you talk about a wood rat, are you talking about a pack rat? Like they
Pack
have
rat.
a hairy tail?
Yep, hairy tail. Yep.
Make a
Pack
big
rat,
mess
wood
and
rat.
stink. And
Yeah, they stink something terrible.
yeah.
They get into the house, they're really, really nasty. So,
Okay, so that was how it started. Was with the pack rats or wood rats.
yep, I was getting paid 50 cents a wood rat. So my mother really wanted the wood rats dead before they got a chance to get into the house. So
Where was this?
this is in northeastern Washington, north of Spokane, Washington, about 80 miles.
Is that far enough to be away from the crazies, or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Back then it was, huh?
Yeah, back then it was, basically all the decisions are made by the people that can see the Space Needle in the state of Washington.
Yeah. There's a lot of that goes on. BC, it's if you can see Stanley Park, there's not many decisions that are made outside of that little wart on the bottom of BC there, and it's getting that way everywhere. It seems we're just about a modern day Hunger Games, aren't we?
Yep.
Yeah. So you started with the wood rats, and then you moved into I understand
Beaver.
Yeah.
I started trapping beaver then shortly thereafter, and that was when I was about 14, I guess, something like that. And one of the interesting things that I was able to trap enough beaver by the time I turned 16. I always wanted to buy a Corvette, but by the time I got 16, I had enough money for a Corvette, but I realized I needed a Ford pickup. And so I went and I couldn't order it myself, but my dad ordered it for me because I was just 16. But I had accumulated enough money from beaver to buy a brand new pickup, which that I don't think is possible these days. But
it's so funny because, beaver, of course, has gone up and down in price, and fur has gone up and down in price. Every now and then, though, you have, the last crazy blip we had would have been about 2013, 14, when, and it was driven mostly by the ranch mink and that, but, marten was hitting $200 a marten, and the beaver is making a nice comeback. If you do your work and you take your beaver in the wintertime, you're going to get 40, 50, maybe even $60 for the beaver at this last auction. As much of an auction as it was, they can't get anybody there in person. So, but the other stuff has risen in price so much more. Like that Ford truck, when you bought it back then, was probably what?
$4,600.
That's what I was going to say, $5,000. And now
so basically it's 10 times. So in theory, a beaver should be worth $300 rather than $30 at this same time as a comparable.
But you know what I think happened? A lot of people have asked me why this happens, and I don't know. Let me run this one by you. I think the ranching did it to us. I think the fact that a mink coat at one time was very very spendy thing, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 for a mink coat. Now the price on that has dropped through the floor because there's so many mink ranchers out there, and I think that drug the wild fur down with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's going to be interesting to see when they Denmark and all the places where they destroyed all the mink because of the COVID. I'm interested to see what's going to be the outcome of all what just took place.
Well, I think we're seeing the beginning of the outcome. Our muskrats have really gone up. The muskrats are the first things that are affected by the mink, and mostly because female mink, when she gets down to around about $12, well, she's about the same as 3 muskrats. And so that depresses the price of muskrats. And mostly what female mink are used for, and what a lot of muskrats are used for, is for lining the inside of down coats in places like Korea and Vietnam and that kind of thing. It's quite a popular a trend, I guess. I'm not sure that it's necessary for the weather and that, but it's a very popular trend. So once that female mink gets down to $12, well, now it kicks the heck out of our muskrat prices and that. And now the mink have disappeared. All of a sudden, I just had I sent my mink for this last auction. These are all wild mink, and I got I think I sent, I forget what I said, 30 mink or whatever, but a dozen of them, 10 or a dozen of them made top lot. And that was $10.50. but back when they were working with wild mink to make those mink coats, it took a lot of mink, because to be able to match the colors and to match sizes and all that, it took a lot of mink. Now today they just walk up to a barn that has 2,000 mink in it. They're all the same color, same size, same age, same everything. Yeah. It has greatly devalued the value of wild animals. I think we totally became relegated to the role of being just trim, right?
Yeah, pretty much. The wild fur only makes up 5% of the fur trade currently. Where like you said, at earlier years it was significantly different. So, in the 30s or late 20s, Pine Marten was worth a month's wages. And so at least.
Hey folks, Rich from Trapping Inc. TV here. And we all have our idea of the perfect morning. You know what I'm talking about. For me, the perfect morning starts with the aroma and flavor of freshly brewed Old Smokes coffee. Studies have shown that just the smell of fresh coffee can boost brain activity. No kidding. Well, that's certainly no secret to me. I can barely talk before that first cup. Just ask Sandy. I'm a dark roast man, and Old Smokes Coffee's darkest roast, stout maple, is what gets my day in gear. Extra dark, it's strong, aromatic, and smooth. Gets me revved up for whatever the day throws at me. Old Smokes roast their coffee over wood fires, the old-fashioned way. Wood roasting takes more time, much longer than modern hot air roasting. Slow roasting over wood takes the bitter out of the bean and imparts a heavenly taste and aroma from the wood smoke. Old Smokes makes a roast perfect for each person. There are 5 roasts, from light to extra dark, each roasted over a different wood for a unique flavor. Did you know the darker the roast, the lower the caffeine content? It's true. Caffeine is a volatile oil that evaporates with roasting. The lightest roast has the most caffeine, and the darkest roasts have the most flavor. Right now, you can order from their online store and use our promo code RICH. That's RICH. And get 10% off your entire order. Pretty simple. Just go to www.oldsmokescoffee.com. That's OLE smokescoffee.com and use the promo code RICH. That is promo code RICH for 10% off your entire order. And now let's get to today's show.
People would go on a marten track and they would go after that one Pine Marten, which that was kind of an interesting period of time when, silver fox that were, a $300 silver fox when a day's wages was, $1.50.
Well, it was fascinating. We had kind of that stuff here too. Like if you go to Fort Chip up in the northeast corner of Alberta, it is the one of the largest freshwater deltas in the world, and that is the Peace River comes together and then they head out back to the Arctic Ocean. But it's a large freshwater delta, and so you have all these sloughs and lakes and that hold muskrats. They're all shallow. They get flooded every so many years, or they did until the Bennett Dam was put in. But during from the late 1800s into especially into when the Depression was going on, that was where people went, because every muskrat was worth $1 to $3. And during the Depression, nobody was getting that kind of money for a day's wages. And so It was the largest city in Alberta. And it was all because of muskrat. It was all because of fur
Wow.
trapping. Yeah. Oh, they
Wow.
take hundreds of thousands of muskrats out of there, or they did that at that time out of that one freshwater delta. And it's an inland delta, which makes it very unique, right?
Mhm.
Rather than the deltas you have up, like the Mackenzie Delta and that where it flows into the Arctic Ocean. It was pretty interesting to learn the history that or the influences of history that trapping has had. But your own history, then you started with beaver, and you were making, back then I guess beaver would be $30.
Yeah, $30 average thereabouts. And that continued for a long time. It continued that. Of course, there was that period in the 70s when coyotes went ballistic and went up, and cats took off pretty good then. When I first started trapping cats, they were $20, bobcat that is, and coyotes were about $6 and that. Well, then they jumped up to somewhere around 100 for cats and 50 for coyotes in the early 70s. And then when was the period when they got they got up to about $200 for the coyotes in 76 maybe?
I don't remember
been,
that. I remember that like
no.
78 to 81, 82 lynx were just like crazy.
Yeah, that's when the bobcats went up, were $400 or $500 at that point in the 80s there.
Yeah.
That might have been when the coyotes got to 200 too. There was a period of time when I could make pretty good money on coyotes and that. So I know my son, must have been in the early 90s. He asked me, he said, Dad, I want to, and he'd heard the story about me buying a pickup. He said, Dad, I want to catch as many bobcats as I can so I can buy a pickup. And he was 16.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'll help you. So by then this was after, that'd be after 2000, because we were having to use box traps at that time. So I'd figured out a way to trap bobcats using cage traps, and I'd actually figured out that there's a real benefit to cage trapping. You used to lose bobcats occasionally being eaten by a cougar or being eaten by another big male, and it was just a shame to lose a bobcat when it was caught in a foothold or a snare. And so by cage traps, you eliminated that problem. And then so what I did is I went out and I pre-baited during the week, and then we had a 24-hour trap check after I-713 pants, which banned the use of all body gripping devices. So I'd pre-bait, and I had as many as 600 baits out at one time, and then he'd take off on his snowmobile and check all the baits, and he'd carry a box trap with him, or actually he could carry 2 of them with him at the time, and any bait that got hit, because it was all frozen the bait, and the bobcats had hit the bait and they wouldn't leave it. And we usually used a piece of beaver meat about the size of a cantaloupe or so, but all they could do is gnaw on it because it was frozen solid, but they wouldn't leave it either. And so he'd set a trap, and then he'd go back the next day on Sunday, and he was catching, always he'd have 1 or 2, but he had as many as 5 several times, I think, and in a day. And that's when cats were $350, $400. And so, but he ended up catching in a couple months, and out and bought a Toyota Tundra pickup. So a used one, but nevertheless, he was able to, I don't remember how many, $12,000, $15,000, something like that.
So that's awesome.
So he bought his with the bobcats.
So when you were pre-baiting, what did you do? Take like a frozen chunk and nail it to a tree, or how were you doing that?
Yeah, you have to keep it up off the ground. Otherwise the coyotes will grab it. But once it's up off the ground, the coyotes won't bother it. And then I used a concoction of basically rotted down fish and skunk essence and RV antifreeze, and just squirt a spray of it up the side of a tree. And that'd draw them for quite a ways. But, basically when I was pre-baiting, I would just go until I cut a set of cat tracks, and I'd put in a bait and spray it up the side of the tree and hang a ribbon for him. And then he'd just go to the drainage and head up the drainage with his snowmobile until he found a ribbon and check the bait. If there's cat tracks around it, then he'd set a trap. If there wasn't, he'd just blow on to the next one.
That's fascinating. And what a great system. I've never heard of anybody doing that. I guess mostly because everybody, today at least where we are, we just set a trap and you walk away, right? But you had to use cage traps.
Yeah, we were forced into that. We were forced into a 24-hour check. We were forced into using cage traps. Like I earlier mentioned, I discovered there's some real advantages to using cage traps. So we were able to turn loose the females, which, of course, a milky-bellied female is worth very little compared to a tom in that. And it just made a lot of sense to me to be turning the females loose. Here it is perfectly fine. If you shake a cat up in a trap, he won't go back in it. And so a good friend of mine, he asked me, he called me up one day and he said, "Hey, have you been up Mitchell Flats trapping cats?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" "Yeah, I figured you were, because I got all these cats that walk up to the front of the cage and just look at it and then turn around and walk off."
You know what? I refer to lynx as the stoned hippie wandering through the bush all the time, because they just make no sense and they will do the dumbest things. And then you got to prove me wrong. You actually trained a cat to do something?
The majority of them.
Yeah.
The majority of them won't go back in. I know I had one here not too long ago. My stepson was trapping cats and he was turning the females loose, because that's what I'd kind of taught him to do. And he said, "This damn female keeps getting back in the trap." He caught it 3 times. He'd shake it up harder the next time, and then it'd still get back in it the next time. But finally, he finally ended up killing it just because he couldn't keep it out of his trap. But that's not generally what happened. Generally, you shake them up once and they won't go back in a trap.
I know a guy who's thinking right now that wishing that we had a problem with bobcats in Alberta, because he does ADC work, and one of the things they do is they try to drive coyotes away through disruptive behavior and doing things like that. But it is funny that you like, to me, the dumbest animal out there just about is a cat, like a lynx, and everybody has this great respect for Wolverine, that the Wolverine are so intelligent and everything. Yet we have a study going on here with the Alberta Conservation Association, where we live trap Wolverine, and then we collar them, and they get drugged, and we do studies on them, all that. And because of these collars, we can GPS follow them and all that. We've discovered we have way more Wolverine than we ever dreamt we had, and it's actually been a good thing. You usually, as a trapper, you're kind of scared to get into this, because it'll turn up being something that removes your rights, and they'll get rid of the ability to trap Wolverine. And I've been told that that's where they were at, and that the study was actually, they thought was going to prove that they should shut down Wolverine trapping in Alberta, and it proved the exact it proved the exact opposite. They proved that the snowpack wasn't as important, and that far more of them lived in the flat boreal forests that we have up north, like where my trap line is, as compared. They thought that the vast majority of Wolverine lived along the eastern slopes of the Rockies, and that's just the smallest part of the population. But these animals, when they put this proposal up, and they were going to do DNA trapping, where they would have these alligator clips there that would pinch fur off of them, so then they could test the DNA, to sample how big the population is and all this kind of stuff. And these guys are all brilliant and in their own way, but I'm sitting there watching this and I'm thinking, so then they're talking about these big old log traps, where it's a deadfall trap and it closes the lid. Basically, they're in a big coffin, right? And we went through some learning there, because if a Wolverine can see daylight anywhere, he can eat his way out. So we had to do a lot of redesign there to actually keep them in there. But then I says, it got bother me so much. I said to him finally, I says, I got one problem here. I said, these animals, have this reputation for being so incredibly smart. How are we ever going to get them back, to get that collar? And well, they said, well, we've thought of that too. So everything is downloaded through GPS and all that. And the only thing that we'd ever want to recatch them for is to weigh them and, check to see if they're pregnant, if they're female, that kind of stuff. Right. And I said, okay. Because they said, I don't know how we're ever going to catch them again, and I even the fact of how you were going to put a collar on them, the way they're bullet shaped right from their nose to their shoulders, right? And I'm thinking that's even going to, how do we keep a collar on? Turns out they will go into a cage over and over and over again. We have created welfare Wolverine. They have names. We discovered one there. I forget his name now. I think Goliath. I think it was something like that. Big Wolverine male. We've discovered that males often travel with their sons for a year. And this one guy keeps going back to the log pen, and they go there, and the son is laying outside. We have trail cams all around all these things. The son is laying outside, and he's on his back, and it's just doing all this kind of stuff, waiting for dad to get out of the pokey, right? Because dad's in jail. and so of course, he runs off when the bios come up. These things, they all have a trigger on them, so we know that when an animal's in there. And there's lots of food in there too, right? That's what brought him in there. Is there's lots of food, and they go there and they knock him out. They tranquilize him. They check him all out. They let him go, and he'll be back sometimes two and three times in a year. And he brings the boy with him, and it's like, and I'm thinking, God, these things aren't like what everybody thinks. They're not brilliant. They're just, you have to be a place where there's lots of Wolverine. And then you understand, how easy it is to catch Wolverine, right? But that was, and then now you tell me that you can climatize a cat to not go into a cage. I was like, oh no, the cats are brighter than Wolverines.
Well, I tried that same thing with Pine Marten, because I thought, well, maybe I should be turning the female Pine Marten loose with the same concept in mind, up my production for the area. And so what I found is the Pine Marten are the same way. They will go right back in the trap. He's going to be, you catch him one day, he's going to be there tomorrow too, and he'll be there the next day, so that didn't really work. So my next attempt was to use gang sets and put in a beaver carcass and get them using it, and then set about 10 traps around it, because here in Southeast Alaska, there's a lot of Pine Marten per square mile in certain locations. And they're per area. So I'd set a half a dozen traps or 8 traps around this bait, and then selected all the males that I wanted to keep, and then turn all the females loose. But that turned out to be way more work than it was worth. And I did it for 2 years, and finally decided it really wasn't gaining as much as what I wanted to accomplish. So I kind of gave up that program.
What was your percentage? Or was there anything you could track?
I didn't really track it as much, as I was just more interested in turning the females loose. And if it was a juvenile, I was just visually looking at it and seeing, well, it's either got to be a female or a juvenile, and then turn it loose. I figured, well, if it is a male juvenile, then that's going to replace the ones that I did take out of the big males. So anyway, I had tried that, and like I said, I finally gave that up and decided it really wasn't doing me as much good as it did in the case of the cats. It was real noticeable. So,
well, I think the biggest problem is that cages are not cheap. Cages are pretty awkward to move around.
Hey, Rich here. Sandy and I are pleased at the rapid growth of our exclusive community, Trapping Inc. at locals.com. We created the community to connect more closely with our fans, friends, and supporters without the interference and censorship of social media companies. Because this community is subscriber exclusive, there is no censored photos, shadow banning, and deplatforming as happens on Twitter and Facebook. Trolls are non-existent, as not a one will spend a nickel and put their money where their mouth is to protest on a paid site. You know it. We are steadily moving all Trapping Inc. YouTube videos and podcasts as quickly as time and bandwidth allow. We're tickled and surprised to see how large of library we must move. As well, we are sharing articles on trapping and guns and shooting. Our new TV series, Married to the Hunt, videos are here too. Hours and hours of never before released to the internet hunting and fishing from around the world. TrappingInc.locals.com will be the exclusive home of all Trapping Inc. content from the past and into the future. What else is there to do? Well, there's a forum for everyone to post pictures on and interact. You can message us directly on TrappingInc.locals.com, as well as interact with all the other subscribers. These are all people with common interests. Get in here. This whole venture is about taking the Trapping Inc. TV community to the next level, building a community of shared interest and interacting with all of our friends. Who knows where we can go from here? Just go to locals.com and sign up for a free account. Then search for Trapping Inc. and subscribe for $5 a month. That's it. Go to locals.com to open a free account and then subscribe for $5 a month to Trapping Inc. Help us spread the truth about a way of life and the responsible, ethical management of the wild resources. trappinginc.locals.com. Now back to the show.
Well, actually, I made a folding trap that lays flat, and it was 24 inches long, and it take up about 2 inches. I could carry about 30 or 40 of them in my box on the back of my snowmobile.
Okay,
So
not
it's
all
a
of us
folder.
are MacGyver like you. we don't have your abilities.
Well, I had all the stuff from building the muskrat traps.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Like your muskrat traps. You sent me some of your non-grip muskrat traps, and they're a floating colony trap. And I had some success with it this year. I only got to use it in the spring, which spring is a bad time for muskrat trapping around here for a couple reasons. One, if they're gonna die, they die in the winter. And two, all these lakes, I trap the heck out of them every fall. Because it's the old thing, like when we were kids, the old fellows would sit around and say, oh, that, they'd be whittling and chewing Copenhagen, and they'd say, that lake out back is just plumb full of rats. But I'm not gonna go there till springtime, and then they're all going to be big, and they're all going to be prime, yeah. And then most of them would die off. They would never make the winter, right? I mean, Mother Nature sets it up so that only 10% of them ever need to make it to be able to procreate, to breed or whatever, and whether it's muskrats or fisher or whatever. And with muskrats, it's probably not even 10% make it.
Yeah.
They
say you can trap 90% of the muskrats and maintain a healthy population through indefinite. Just by catching 90%, you reduce the numbers down to where you have a healthy population and repeat the process over and over and over again, and never let it populate up and disease out or die out.
That's just it. Like, I mean, the end for any wild animal is not pretty. There are several, about 4 different things that how they can end up, how they can die. Old age isn't one of them. But when the fur market died in 81, 82, and muskrats died, right? Like, I mean, the price dropped, and so people quit trapping muskrats. Well, within a couple of years, we Toliarima swept through the muskrat population up here in the north, and we never seen a muskrat until the late 90s. Like, I mean, that's how bad it was. Like, I mean, it just wiped everything out, and that was just disease, because that's Mother Nature's way, and people don't understand that, like the various anti-fur people, when they talk about how cruel you are and the choices that that you're making killing those animals. What's your answer when people say, how that you're being cruel? Like,
I have an opportunity in the store to talk to people a lot, and I find it really enjoyable to if they'll interject in a conversation about it, we probably have some things we could agree upon. We can probably agree that no animal dies of old age, no wild animal dies of old age. And so, they may give a little bit of slack. Well, you grab your smartphone and you ask your smartphone, what percentage of wild animals die of old age? And they may dispute it, but your answer is basically none, or a non-negligible amount. And so, so what's the other possibilities of this animal to die? Well, it could die of starvation, it could be consumed by another predator, or it could die of disease, or it could die from a conibear trap.
Yeah.
Out of those 4 deaths, which one is the most humane? Well, I'm thinking starvation, as if you want to, so many times people relate their own thoughts of themselves to an animal, which I don't know if that's truly accurate, but nevertheless, given that, I would prefer not to die of starvation. I would prefer not to die of disease. I would prefer not to be consumed by another predator. I would rather be killed relatively instantly.
Yeah.
So out of the humane deaths of that animal, trapping, in fact, is the most humane. But the more important point to look at is is how humane is it to the animals that are left? Because now they no longer have to compete with that, with that animal. Now their environment is so much better than it was before. So as a steward of the land, I mean, I'm doing my part to make the environment better for the wildlife, not worse.
And, you know, like here in Canada, we have, our by law, our traps are mandated to kill in a certain amount of time. So when you're talking about the conibear body grip trap, you know, the 110s, 120s, 160s, 220s have to kill within 120 seconds, 2 minutes. When my time comes, I'll take the 220. Thanks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the 280s and 330s, they have to kill in 300 seconds or 5 minutes. That's still a lot faster than anything else. Like, I mean, you watch some of the animals, like muskrats. Sometimes when you catch muskrats, you know, especially in the springtime when they've been breeding and that, they'll have half their innards hanging out. Now that animal's going to die. It's just going to take it days to die. You know, so what's more preferable? You know, like, you know, going into a trap and it being over with, or that situation, right? People, you know, I get a lot of these questions, and like I say, I think a lot of people, because so much today is by internet or by email or whatever, and you don't get any inflection, so you're always kind of a little bit gun shy, right? You don't get any inflection about what they're, you know, where they're coming from. But I think a lot of people just want to understand, and there's a lot of people that I've explained it to. Overwhelmingly, like probably 80% of the people that watch our show or our podcasts or anything are not trappers, but they're just fascinated with the life, and they're fascinated with you know, the results that it has had on the economy and on the countries involved, right? It's one of those things is just hardwired into the human psyche is the trapping and hunting and that, right?
Yeah. I get a lot of enjoyment of talking to them when I come in, and I, you know, particularly the Californians. I enjoy Californians immensely, talking to them, because they, as you know, they probably recently banned the use of all fur products and all fur manufacturing, fur products. And yet I see that the same people are going to figure out that, you know, according to most of the stuff I've read and understand, that there's somewhere around 800,000 tons of microfibers being flushed into the ocean, which now most of the sea life has got plastic in it, basically microfibers. And I can see the same people, you know, that have been the ones that are saying, send me money and I'll right this terrible wrong of trapping. You know, I can see them, you know, these are fur koozies I make here are biodegradable, organic, and a renewable resource. Can you say that about the microfibers?
Hold that up.
None of them.
Hold that up. Let's see that. Yeah. There you go. And that's a beer koozie, beer can koozie, and a beer bottle koozie. And those are made from Beaver?
Beaver and Otter. That is what I make these out of. But,
that's cool.
so anyway, but they're biodegradable, organic, and a renewable resource, you know. And so these same people that were the ones that were saying, send me money and I'll right this terrible wrong of fur trapping, could be the ones that are saying, send me money and I'll right this terrible wrong of using polyester and petroleum made fabrics that are now destroying the oceans and the sea life and the ecosystem in the oceans. So
yeah,
I can see that coming around.
I find that how the people approach you the first time kind of sets the tone, because if they ask a question, then there is a chance that an explanation will make sense. But if they come up and you know, karma's going to get you and the million, 100,000 other things, that awful things they say, including my grandchildren and all that kind of stuff, I know that no amount of facts is ever going to get through to them. They're operating just on emotion and whatever was injected into their cereal that morning, you know. People, just when you think people couldn't disappoint you anymore, then along comes that, right? I know what you talk about when you talk about managing the populations, that, you know, how important it is that we keep trapping. It takes a lot of trappers to make a difference on a population. I take a look at my trap line, 144 square miles, and you know, at its lowest point. They say that you need 0.4 mature marten per square kilometer in order to have maintain a breeding population, in order to be self-sustaining. So at the minimum, I have 150 marten running around on that trap line, and I catch 35 to 50 of them every year. I'm not taking out that 80 or 90%, but in actual fact, I probably have, when they talk about good populations, like in probably your country, probably I know that in the Yukon and that they're talking about 2.4 marten per square kilometer. Well, at that point now, that the number just absolutely jumps up. And I take a look at how, when did it become so popular to be able to blame a single person out there for all of these problems? Like the marten population is down, or the coyotes have dropped off, that kind of stuff, when nobody even begins to look at the variables involved in the nature of things to begin with. Like, we went through, probably 10 years ago, we started getting low snow levels in the wintertime, and the marten populations dropped, and the fisher populations rocketed. And I didn't put that together. It wasn't until I was doing research later that all of a sudden, then we started about 6 years ago, we started getting 10 feet of snow, 10 feet of snow, 12 feet of snow, big winters again. And the population of the marten went like this, and the fisher went like this. And so I started researching all this. It turns out that marten do best where there's more than 2 feet of snow a month, and fisher do best where there's less than 2 feet of snow a month. So was that really the variable that was important there? Did my trapping have anything to do with it? What about the oil companies or the lumber companies? All that stuff. But no, that one guy, that trapper, he's at fault, right?
Yeah, I see the same thing here. When I mentioned the 90%, that only pertains to muskrats, where they're breeding in some cases 2 or 3 times a year and things like that, where the pine marten are significantly different, where they're extremely easy to overtrap. Entirely different situation there. And so just making that distinction, that each animal species has a different productivity. And when you're trapping your pine marten, you notice that when you have pressure on the pine marten, they tend to have a little bit better reproduction rate. I know areas that I've gone into and started trapping that hadn't been trapped, the number of marten actually increase from trapping pressure, because I think what it does is, if my understanding is correct, like the farmers that raise hogs, they feed the hell out of the hogs before they breed them, so they have a higher number of fat cells in their system, so they produce a larger number of ova, and they have larger litters. And so I think in the case of all mammals, that's the case, where if they go into breeding season where the numbers have been reduced and they have an abundance of feed, they have more healthy numbers. Same thing with coyotes. Instead of coyotes having 4 pups, when they go into the breeding season and they have an abundance of feed, they may have 6 or 8 pups.
Yeah, we've discovered that. Part of the thing with marten that is really, really odd is a marten is one of the few fur bearers that can freeze to death. They have such a low fat content. Their body is, a fat marten has 2 little gobs of fat under its armpits and a little bit at the groin. That's it. That's a fat marten, right? Not compared to an otter or whatever, that where you get pounds of fat off them. That's why the snow is so important. They have to be able to get under that snow and into that Andean climate in order to survive those cold weathers. Yes, I do find that when I trap hard, I end up having more marten rather than less. We have exclusive trap lines in Alberta. So I have 12 miles by 12 miles, 4 townships is 144 square miles. That's mine. I'm the only person who can trap it. So I can control how many animals of whatever kind are taken off of it. But the fact that you do better when you're trapping them harder has more to do with the fact that the generational age of marten is really, really low. Like a generation is 3 or 4 years. That's it. I never understood that, because people are talking about, oh, I haven't been across the river over there in 20 years. I'll bet you the marten are just stacked up over there. Well, you can't stack them up over there because the generation is so short. I was contacted by a biologist out of Michigan, and him and his wife were doing a study, and they had taken and collared or put beacons or whatever it was in little RFD trackers is what it was in Marten and they got like young of the year, and they had one that made it to 5 years, and I says, oh, is that unique? Like, I didn't really know anything about the aging of Marten. He says, that's unbelievable. He says, very few make it to 4 years. And, for one to make it to 5 was unbelievable. So in a lot of cases, what happens then is that your population might just get old, and your population might, become unbalanced because you don't have those females in the time when they could producing lots of young. And the young are, of course, are the one that's the most that don't make it through the winter, and two, that's what brings the diversity as the if she has a big litter, they're going to spread out more because they need to find their own areas, where if she just has one, it might stay in her area. So there's a lot of advantage to that. And I mean, we know that from, as you mentioned, with coyotes and wolves. We know that from when they're trying to now control the Alberta wolves that we exported down to Montana.
Gee, thanks, by the way.
You're welcome. I got paid.
Why couldn't you have just said, no, we're not going to give you any of those? Why? That would have saved a lot of problems for us if you just said no.
Do you know how many conversations were over a beer or a bottle saying, you know what? And they paid us for it. Yeah. It was crazy. It was crazy.
I used to trap in the Selkirk range right against I lived right against the Canadian border. I had a lot of friends in Canada, so I'm very familiar with your trapping system. I actually, for a number of years, I tried to develop that in the state of Washington, but it fell on deaf ears and never could get it done. But I trap in an area where they had the only woodland caribou in the lower 48, and we'd trade them. I don't know what the hell we were trading. Bighorn sheep, I think we were trading them for caribou. So for these woodland caribou, and finally the Canadians said, "You're not getting any more goddamn woodland caribou. They keep dying when they get down there." And then the wolves came in, and I remember talking to the biologist, and I came down off my trap one, the Forest Service biologist. I said, you got some wolves up there right now, and I said, what are you going to do when your precious endangered wolves find your precious endangered caribou? They're not going to eat one of them. They're going to eat all of them. You know that, right? And he said, yeah, and there's nothing I can do. They're both protected. So that's what happened. And so the Canadians then finally said, we're not giving you any more caribou if you're going to just kill them. So,
and now the caribou are in trouble in BC because of wolves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy. I don't understand. Like, the bounty system is such an incredible way for controlling animals. Like, I mean, people go out and hunt wolves or trap wolves or whatever, based on a bounty. It works really well. The political willpower isn't there for it.
I think the operative word there is bounty. Now, if you look at the expense reimbursement they do in Idaho, that's not a bounty. It's an expense reimbursement for the welfare of the ungulate population. And so, there's $1,000 a wolf down there that the sportsman club pays for expense reimbursement. It's not a bounty, it's expense reimbursement.
Yes.
So you take that word bounty out of the equation and it becomes much more palatable.
They just opened that's the Federation for Wildlife Protection or something like that, foundation, I think it's called. I have talked with the Robert, who's the president of it. They just opened a chapter in Montana, and of course around Missoula and Billings, and that's not going over real well with all the imports.
Yeah.
But they have a problem with, and they do have a trapping system, trapping season and that for wolves in Montana, and they've been very effective with it. And they just don't want to do anything that they're going to encourage more people. The fact that you folks can come from all over the United States and go trapping there if they've taken a course in that kind of stuff. Can they're worried about the pressure that might create. The Wisconsin wolf season this year was something else. Did you follow that at all?
I did not.
Well, it was I think they wanted to kill like 100 wolves. They ended up killing twice that. The season was supposed to be, I may be wrong about this, season was supposed to be 2 weeks long, but they shut it down after 4 days. And get this, do you know the most effective way that they killed wolves? They ran them with dogs. Like those are a way different wolf than the ones around here, because the last oh well, we have cougar hunters, right? We have cougar outfitters and that in Alberta. Alberta's one of those places that has really, really big cougar. They hate wolves because they get their dogs get killed by wolves.
Well, yeah, the wolves start baying. It's just a dinner bell.
Yeah,
dinner bell for the wolves. I mean, it's just okay. There's a hound dog. We'll go eat that one.
Exactly. So. Exactly. So when these guys in Wisconsin were actually killing them by running them with packs, I was like, that's crazy. That's got to be a different kind of wolf altogether.
Yeah. I know I have some friends down still in the lower 48 there that's a real problem for them. They can't turn a hound loose. It just scares the hell out of them because they got a really good chance of losing their hounds.
Yeah, so, I have friends in Wisconsin and Minnesota and that, like they say it's just totally destroying like coon hounds at night and that kind of stuff, right? The fact that the problem they have with wolves.
Hey folks, Rich from Trapping Inc. TV here. And we all have our idea of the perfect morning. You know what I'm talking about. For me, the perfect morning starts with the aroma and flavor of freshly brewed Old Smokes coffee. Studies have shown that just the smell of fresh coffee can boost brain activity. No kidding. Well, that's certainly no secret to me. I can barely talk before that first cup. Just ask Sandy. I'm a dark roast man, and Old Smokes Coffee's darkest roast, stout maple, is what gets my day in gear. Extra dark, it's strong, aromatic, and smooth. Gets me revved up for whatever the day throws at me. Old Smokes roast their coffee over wood fires, the old-fashioned way. Wood roasting takes more time, much longer than modern hot air roasting. Slow roasting over wood takes the bitter out of the bean and imparts a heavenly taste and aroma from the wood smoke. Old Smokes makes a roast perfect for each person. There are 5 roasts, from light to extra dark, each roasted over a different wood for a unique flavor. Did you know the darker the roast, the lower the caffeine content? It's true. Caffeine is a volatile oil that evaporates with roasting. The lightest roast has the most caffeine, and the darkest roast have the most flavor. Right now, you can order from their online store and use our promo code RICH, that's RICH, and get 10% off your entire order. Pretty simple. Just go to www.oldsmokescoffee.com, that's OLE smokescoffee.com, and use the promo code RICH. That is promo code RICH for 10% off your entire order. And now let's get to today's show.
Let's get back to your trap. I wandered off down the road here, and let's get back to your trap and tell me how it started. What?
Well, state of Washington went to ballot box biology probably in about 1998, something like that. They eliminated hound hunting. Then they eliminated cougar hunting. And then the next thing in 2000 was a gal named Lisa Watney introduced a bill to eliminate all body gripping devices in an attempt to eliminate trapping. And it passed. And so we were limited to trapping animals in box traps, which apparently they found that way more humane than a conibear. And so at that time, I started looking at Alaska, because the trapping is important enough to me that I would move to still be able to trap. But I was able to learn how to start trapping with bobcats and with cage traps and that. And I did get some beaver traps, and I found that the beaver caught in a handcock or in a colony swim through trap, they get damaged fur and that. And it was kind of a bad deal, but nevertheless, I still wanted to trap. And, muskrats were were something that we had in the central part of the state, that we had some high numbers. Prior to this, there was 10,000 muskrats a year caught out of the Moses Lake area. And then after a few years, after not having any trapping there, the numbers went down to about 2,000 and that. So, but I still wanted to trap. And so I started trying to figure out, okay, how do I catch a muskrat without gripping his body in any way? And so I started designing these traps and putting trail cameras right below my house where I lived. And when I was in Washington, I had a slough that was down below the house where it's just easy to walk down there and check my cameras each day and see how the trap was working. I had several designs. It took me about a year to get a design that I thought worked. And then after I had a lot of videotapes and that, and figured, okay, now I'm getting, if they get in the trap, they're not getting out, and I'm getting them caught. And at the same time, I discovered with that if I put the bars 1.25 inches apart, that the small and kit muskrats could escape unharmed. And so once again, Lisa Watney forced me into a situation where now I had a better means of trapping and way more productive. I used to be able to catch about 60 muskrats a day on footholds. And when I told my son, he lived in Montana at that time, I said, hey, you're not doing anything this winter, come back, I want to test these traps. I made 80 traps and we went down there and we were catching 120 muskrats a day. And it was just doubled my production. So in Lisa Watney's attempt to limit my trapping, she made me more efficient. So I think I mentioned it earlier to you that I wanted to name it the Lisa Watney 2000, because Lisa Watney is the one that interjected the bill, and it was the year 2000. So I figured that was an appropriate name for it, was the Lisa Watney 2000.
That works. I'm curious about this. I'm curious how they sold this to the voters, because whether they go in your trap or whether they get in a foothold, jump off of a float, they drown. It's over quickly. Yep. I don't see the separation here. Do you?
Yeah, there's no logic. It's just like there's no thought process there. It was an emotional deal. Anytime you go away from scientific management to ballot box management, you got to remember, these people, their only biological training has been watching Gentle Ben on TV. So you got people making decisions on how wildlife should be managed with absolutely no knowledge or understanding of it. And so it's what you end up with.
And then when you get down to the point where you say to them, well, yes, but, and they talk about, well, yeah, but the animal that's his home and you're invading and all that. And you point out that no matter where you live in the world, an animal used to live there. And then they just turn a blind eye. It's like that. It doesn't affect them. So it's not important, right?
Yeah. Logic is not something that applies.
No. So you have 2 models. And I want to say, if anybody would like to see how these work, we have an episode on it this year. I'm actually editing right now on it on Trapping TV. But we also, if you go to our YouTube, we have a out of the box. The day I opened them, put them together and looked at them, shows how they work in that. The 2 different models are, you call the one the inverted door, and that's the one that they can come out of, the little ones come out of. And the other one is a treadle, where they step on a treadle. Once they go in, they step on a treadle.
Basically it's just a teeter-totter that closes the door with the treadle. The other one is it's a bump bar that as they swim up to it, you'll find that a muskrat has no problem at all pushing his way through things. They're pushing their way through brush and grass and everything else all day long. So for them to push their way into that trap, I find that the muskrats will go into the inverted door easier than they will, which the treadle, they actually kind of have to crawl up on it, where I think they feel more comfortable staying in the water going into the inverted door. So you're going to catch them in both the traps. I think you'll catch them sooner in the inverted door, is what my experience has been. Okay. I also had one time I had an inverted door set, and all the carrots kept disappearing. And I thought, shit, what the hell's wrong with this trap? And so I put in a treadle trap there, and I caught all these rats that are about the size of a freaking hamster,
Yeah.
you know, a little bit bigger than a hamster. And I said, okay, my trap was working perfectly, and I overthought it.
Well, at the auction that just happened, all my muskrats sold, and the prices are up. Like, I mean, the good rats are, you know, the 2 and 3 XLs were hitting 650, and which is getting where, you know, where we want to be. But then my XS, my XS ones, my extra smalls, went 4 for $1. So I like the inverted door because I don't want to have any of those little tiny guys. I prefer to let them go and just keep the big ones. But you had a specific reason for making the second one, for making the treadle door that caught everything.
Well, because what happens is that a lot of muskrats caught now are animal damage control. The majority of them probably actually are, if truth be known. And, you know, people don't want to they want to wipe them out. You know, they've been digging tunnels into their dam or doing whatever damage they're doing. Or, you know, when somebody has a boat down on the dock and the muskrats eat the rubber boot around the outdrive and the boat sinks. And I thought, now they don't want to kill just the big ones. They want to kill all of them.
It became personal right there.
Sunk their $80,000 boat, and they have a different opinion on muskrats now. Yeah. That every muskrat should be dead at that point.
Tell them their water was, that their boat's floating in the muskrat's water, that they shouldn't worry about it. You know? The muskrat was there first, right? But you're right, though. We do have those situations, you know, like in the Netherlands. I mean, the country is kept above water by dike systems. Well, they took muskrats over there in the 30s. Now they have a program where they kill over 400,000 a year, these muskrats. And then because they don't believe in being able to use a fur for anything useful, they just incinerate them. So you explain that one, how that is a PETA thing to do, but it's exactly what you say. They're very, very destructive, and they carry disease. I mean, there isn't an animal out there that doesn't need to be controlled. So you developed one that would wipe out everything.
Yeah, that was the treadle. Basically, all it is a teeter-totter. As they go in, reach a certain point, the teeter-totter closes the door. Once they're standing on the teeter-totter, there's no way they can get out, because there's no way they can get to the door without the door being closed. So, you know, it's basically, if they're in there, it's almost 100% catch. I don't know if that. And one of the other neat things about these traps is that I have never caught a duck in one, and I don't know of anybody that's ever caught a duck. So you don't have an issue with waterfowl of any kind. And yeah. So there's several advantages to it. The disadvantages, you know, in comparison to a dozen foothold traps, and the cost of my traps is tremendously different. But it takes a lot of work to make them, and that. I've got a lot of people that I've bought, that I've sold traps to, and they've continually bought more and more of them. And so, I mean, that tells me that they're still working good for them. So.
Well, I did a really neat study with, like I said, this spring, and I as years have gone on, I have quit trapping rats in the spring, just because I know that it's a low shot number, and usually by the time the ice goes here, they're starting to rip one another apart, right? Because of breeding season. So you sent me one of each model, and I set them up on the one lake, and I caught rats and all that. And then the next lake I moved to, I thought, well, I should compare. So I set 11 floats that had 2 1.5 long spring footholds on. So I had 22 out there, and I set the 2 traps that you sent me. And I forget whether it was 3 nights or 4 nights. I'd have to look back at my records, but I ended up catching 3 rats in those 22. So one a night for 22 footholds, and I ended up catching, I think, 17 total in your 2 traps. You know, well, I had to check it out. Like, I mean, because spring is never usually a good time for rat trapping, but I found it really interesting anyway, and they worked really well. I don't know if my extra small problem went away because of course all rats in the spring are big. But
Yeah.
but you don't have any of those issues with ducks or with I didn't have any problems with, like, I never had a mink eat one, which was something new. Usually every muskrat season you lose a couple to mink. They'll dive down, find them hanging there, whatever, pack them back up onto the top on get them up on the float and eat them. Those are tough critters, those mink are. Like, I mean, they're not even an aquatic animal yet. I mean, they're not made to be aquatic. They don't have webbing in their feet or anything else. And yet they when you watch them swim, they don't even swim well. But have you ever watched on YouTube? You ever watched them swim after trout and that? And it's like, he's like struggling to get down there. He's going to drown on the way, you think. And then he gets a hold of a trout as big as him, you know? They're a fascinating critter. You guys must trap a bunch of those in Alaska.
Well, I have never been a mink trapper, and apparently I'm still not a mink trapper. The kids in town here catch more mink than I catch, but there's so many mink here. They should be like trapping muskrats, and yet I have a terrible time catching these mink. I catch mink. I'm not saying I don't catch them, and I just think they should be like trapping muskrats, but they don't respond to bait. Very, very poor, because every time the tide goes out, the dinner table's set, they go down there and they eat in 15 minutes and they got a full belly. So I found that their distance they travel from the den is about 100 yards. Where you think a mink, probably where you're at, they're traveling miles at night.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
No,
Yep.
These things are traveling 100 yards. So you've got a pretty narrow spot you've got to catch them, but they're traveling that distance every time, but they have no interest in bait. So you go to all blind sets. And
Yeah.
so what I ended up, being the most successful, they don't want to push their way through a conibear trigger. And so I took the conibear triggers off and kind of inverted the trap and put a pan type metal pan on it. And if it's exposed, they won't jump on it. But if you can blend that in, it's fairly effective. But I've gone to a lot of work trying to figure out how to make these things into muskrats, because there's hundreds of the things. You talk about, in the day when they were trapping a lot here, there was guys that catch 600 and 800 mink, and huge numbers of mink here. But boy, they're just a different mink than what I've ever was accustomed to. I've only lived here permanently in Alaska for 5 years, although I started trapping up here just shortly after 2000 when they banned trapping in the lower 48, and I've been trapping up here for basically 20 years. And
Are they
the
larger?
mink have never, what?
Are they larger than the mink that you'd find same
The
animal?
The Pine Marten are, though. Pine
Yeah.
Marten from the Selkirk range are freaking huge. And you mentioned the fat on them, the Pine Marten. An interesting thing about these Pine Marten here is they've got fat like a mink almost.
Really?
And they're nearly twice the size of the Marten I got out of the Selkirk range. They're both Americanas. They're not Carinas. They're Americanas here, and then they're Americanas in the Selkirk range as well.
And here's the fascinating thing. I'm showing how we skin and flesh mink. I get all these queries and conversations with people from back in Ontario and east back there. Their mink don't need to be you don't have to put on a board. They don't have that fat under the saddle or anything else.
Oh, these are real fat here, especially the big males. They're just really grease balls, but they have so much to eat here, and the mink per square mile is phenomenal. Like I said, I don't think they travel more than 100 yards from their den, and they got certain places they go down to the beach to eat, and I think they get their belly full in half hour or whatever and turn around and go back up and lay down again.
Well, half of my mink every year are caught in a marten box. They climb the tree and get into a marten box. The other half are caught on sitting a box with a conibear on the beaver dam. And if I get 400 or 500 muskrat in the fall, I just chop them in half and I dump the guts out of the half into a bucket. Well, that's all my mink bait, and I'll just pack a big wad of those guts into the back of a box and put a trap in front of it, and that's sitting on all of any place where I cross a waterway, or and lots of times I know where most of these places are just from being on the trap line for so long, because you would never know that water even ran there, but the mink and the otter travel there every year because there's water that oozes from one spot to another, and that's the trickle that's going through, right? But you don't know it, they know it, so you got to pay attention to your animals. You're in Wrangell, Alaska, right?
Yes. Yep. That halfway down British Columbia, on that tip of ground of Alaska that hangs halfway down British Columbia. You're exactly 1,200 miles due east of me. And when I'm in my place in Saco, Montana, you're 1,200 miles due north of me. When you mentioned about the muskrat traps, I was just chomping at the bit thinking, okay, I've got 200 of these traps. Maybe Rich will call me up and bring your 200 traps. We're going to trap muskrats. You'll find out what skinning muskrats is like, to where your hands get so sore that you think, okay, I've caught enough muskrats. So,
well, I tell you, if we didn't have the crazy COVID thing going on and the border closed, we'd have been on one another's trap line for sure already. You must have, and by the way, I'll never forget the idiot that allows you guys to have that panhandle in rather than BC have it. I think it's Seward. I can blame Seward, can't I? They didn't think he was too bright either at the time.
That's true. Stewart's icebox.
Yeah, his Seward's Folly, it was called for forever. You have like river ocean otter, sea otter, right?
Yes.
They're very large. They got to be like 3 times 60, 70 pounds.
Yes, correct. And one of the amazing things I found out about them, I have several native friends here that are able to harvest them. And one guy, he makes quite a bunch of stuff out of them. He makes, let me see. Oh, just a second.
Hey, Rich here. Sandy and I are pleased at the rapid growth of our exclusive community, Trapping Inc. at locals.com. We created the community to connect more closely with our fans, friends, and supporters without the interference and censorship of social media companies. Because this community is subscriber exclusive, there is no censored photos, shadow banning, and deplatforming as happens on Twitter and Facebook. Trolls are non-existent, as not a one will spend a nickel and put their money where their mouth is to protest on a paid site. You know it. We are steadily moving all Trapping Inc. YouTube videos and podcasts as quickly as time and bandwidth allow. We're tickled and surprised to see how large of library we must move. As well, we are sharing articles on trapping and guns and shooting. Our new TV series, Married to the Hunt, videos are here too. Hours and hours of never before released to the internet hunting and fishing from around the world. TrappingInc.locals.com will be the exclusive home of all Trapping Inc. content from the past and into the future. What else is there to do? Well, there's a forum for everyone to post pictures on and interact. You can message us directly on TrappingInc.locals.com, as well as interact with all the other subscribers. These are all people with common interests. Get in here. This whole venture is about taking the Trapping Inc. TV community to the next level, building a community of shared interest and interacting with all of our friends. Who knows where we can go from here? Just go to locals.com and sign up for a free account. Then search for Trapping Inc. and subscribe for $5 a month. That's it. Go to locals.com to open a free account and then subscribe for $5 a month to Trapping Inc. Help us spread the truth about a way of life and the responsible, ethical management of the wild resources. TrappingInc.locals.com. Now back to the show.
Okay, this is a sea otter hat here. This sea otter here, and then this is a nice seal right here.
Oh yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah.
But the natives here are able to utilize the seal and the sea otter, and that. So
seal is one of the furs that absolutely amazes me because it's way softer and much nicer than I thought it was. I always thought they were kind of bristly, right? But
yeah, well, they are a little bit. But it's completely waterproof too, though.
Yeah.
What I was starting to allude to is the interesting thing about the sea otter is they're born in the water and never leave the water, and so their environment is exactly the same, and they're prime year round.
That's fascinating.
So, we always think, I found that really interesting that the sea otter basically their environment never changes, maybe 3 degrees or something. And so they're prime year round.
Well, I understand that the reduced harvest and all that has been gigantically successful, bringing their population back. But
no, we've gone to the other side of that dramatically. We
don't you hate that when that happens? When we never have an endpoint, and when we can say that we're recovered, and the same thing's happening with the grizzly bear right now in Alberta. We're at that point, and nobody ever thought we'd get to this point, I guess. But now what? Now do we open the hunting season again, or whatever? There has to be some hard and fast numbers.
Yeah. At what point do we go back to scientific management? Okay,
exactly.
They did. In the Marine Mammal Act, they determined that the carrying capacity of sea otter was to be 20,000 sea otter in Southeast Alaska. We currently have over 55,000. So it's basically destroying the ecosystem. Play communities like Cake and that had $1 million crab fishery. They can't even find a crab to eat out there now. It's non-existent.
Because of the otter.
Because of the sea otter. I know my son has a steelhead guiding business, and many of the creeks that he goes up had some really good clam digging. And they'd stop and dig clams, and they came back down. And when the sea otters found it, it looks like somebody'd been in there with a backhoe, and you can't find a clam. They get every single one of them. And the damage to the ecosystem is just tremendous with these things. And we have a crab fishery right here in Wrangell, but unfortunately, all of the crab fishermen and all the other communities all end up here because it's the only place that the sea otters are not, because the sea otters require kelp beds to sleep in. But we've got the Stikine River plus a bunch of other rivers that come in, the Bradfield, a bunch of other rivers that come in here. And I think that's what helps hold the kelp down, as well as the sea otters don't like the fresh water. Apparently, that's what I understand. And so for some reason, they just don't come back here. And so we still have crab here, but it's the only place in Southeast Alaska, basically, that there is, because the sea otters have wiped out everything else. So now we're overfishing the crab here.
That's
at least in my opinion, anyway.
That's amazing. We have the same thing happening on the East Coast with the seals. Now there's no cod left because the seal population are so huge. They quit the harvesting of it. First they quit the harvesting of the young ones, the white ones, and then after, which led to some interesting conversations about what an ermine was. we show a trapping show with a white, of course, with a white weasel, and people would say, "Well, those are babies. You can't kill him, can you?" Not understanding that it wasn't a baby marten; it was a total different critter. But it was a great opportunity to teach anyway. But yet they back there now they've got so many of the seal that it's done the same thing to the cod population, and there's no cod fishery anymore. I first knew about how the otter were getting so popular, and that was, it came up on I was working on my YouTube channel, and somebody posted up a picture of people kayaking, and the guy's in a kayak, and the otter comes up and crawls up on the kayak. Well, that thing was gigantic. They said 70 pounds, and I believed it, and it was just hugely fat. But I mean, it was like he was going to sink his kayak, and then it went in and talked about how that they had a whole herd of them that lived in this one little particular bay or whatever it was, and I was just fascinated by it. They have the softest fur on the planet, right? Like the most. Actually,
what's interesting about it is it has 900 to 1 million hair follicles per square inch. And that's what allows them to be in the water and actually never get wet to the hide, because the water can't penetrate it. A beaver is about 100,000 hair follicles per square inch, but he's basically more time out of the water than he is in the water.
Yeah.
So he does not have that requirement to have that many hair follicles. But if you take and feel a sea otter or a plucked and sheared beaver, a plucked and sheared beaver is actually quite a bit softer.
Right, because no guard hairs, right?
Yeah.
I know that, I think it goes river otter, and then for density, and then fur density you're talking about, and then chinchilla. Chinchilla is about 600,000, and then the sea otter, and the sea otter's in a class all of its own. But since they never come to shore, then harvest of them it must be all by hunting.
Yeah, but they shoot, yeah, and they float like a bobber. So it's not like if you shoot a beaver, you got a few seconds to get a beaver before he sinks. In the case of the sea otter, you shoot them and they're going to be floating forever. They're not going to sink. So
because they're so fat.
Yeah, my friend that does the seal hat and does the other thing, he uses a 204 and just shoots them in the head. And after he's got a bunch of them floating around out there, then he goes and gathers them up and comes back and skins them and ships them off to the tannery.
Seriously?
Yeah.
How many is he allowed to take?
He can take as many as they wants. However, they need to be killing at least 5,000 of them just to kill that year's production. And the natives so far, I don't think they've killed much more than about 1,200 is the most they've ever killed in 1 year. And usually they're around 800 or 900 is all that the natives have harvested. And I don't know why, because I think he sold his last blanket for $10,000 that he made.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a tremendous opportunity. And the interesting thing about it, in the Marine Mammal Act, the state was to take it over when they were recovered. But it's so political that the game department doesn't want to do their job because of the political pressure they would get, is what it appears to me anyway.
Yeah.
Because right in the Marine Mammal Act, it says that the game department was to take over scientific management of the sea otter when they reach carrying capacity. Well, we perhaps passed that quite some time ago, and the state has done nothing. And we keep bugging them about it, but they just don't want the political flack of and it's such an opportunity. The game department has an opportunity to actually manage it through a tagging. You could buy a sea otter tag for $500. They could easily sell them. They're already in financial trouble anyway. They have a resource that is going to end up dying off if they do nothing. So these sea otter are all going to die. They basically make 100-year cycles, just like all animals cycle in that. And one of the things, I had one guy here from British Columbia that was here staying with us, and he was talking about they dug up some of the mittens, the native dump sites. Right. And they found that there was 100 years of having clamshells in the dump sites and 100 years without having clams in the dump sites. And they figured that was the cycle of the sea otter. It was 100-year cycles, So these sea otters are going to die off if we continue to do nothing, and they'll make a big wide swings like they always do, like every other animal. So. Yeah,
but the worst part is then when they start to die off, then they'll point to it to being something else. They'll say that it's halibut fishermen or that it's pleasure boaters or whatever, and they'll try and keep their thumb on the scale to artificially influence that population, when nature just gets to a point where it's boom and bust, boom and bust, boom and bust. There's no in between. We can clip some of those tops off a little bit, if we take and manage it a little, but you can't, when people are being ruled by emotion, the Disneyfication of the world, there's just no making them understand that,
Well, it's just ballot box biology or scientific biology, and they're just the majority of the people now prefer the ballot box biology rather than scientific biology.
I cannot believe that they would not, like a $10,000 for a blanket. Oh my God. Oh my God. You have stepped aside.
Hat
What's that?
I was just saying that the hat I just showed you is $550. That you could probably make probably 10 of those at least, probably more than that out of a sea otter. So I mean, it's a huge potential for revenue for the entire state, and yet they just ignore it.
I wonder why. I can't figure that one.
Back to our original comment about emotion versus logic.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd still be illogical and wealthy, which you don't hear about from trappers very much, but anymore. But you've taken a different approach. this is your fur shop in Wrangell, Alaska. And how do people find it if they want to find you online?
Fursalaska.com.
Okay. And you have stepped sideways from the traditional method of catching fur and sending it to auction or selling it to a fur buyer. You've decided to take it right through the end and make your own products out of everything. So we were just before we went on the air, you talked about what a beaver was worth to you. You want to explain
Beaver's
that?
Beaver's worth about $300 to me. I make beaver tail coasters out of the tail. I
Show
sell
those.
a set of, okay, bear with me a second.
Well, Mike chases that down. That is cool. Like I've seen beaver tail wallets, and I've seen some a little bit of beaver tail gun scabbards. But this the beaver tail coasters is really cool.
Oh, basically, I just skin out the tail at the same time. I've started case skinning my beaver, and so a case skin beaver.
Hey, Rich here. Sandy and I are pleased at the rapid growth of our exclusive community, Trapping Inc. at locals.com. We created the community to connect more closely with our fans, friends, and supporters without the interference and censorship of social media companies. Because this community is subscriber exclusive, there is no censored photos, shadow banning, and deplatforming as happens on Twitter and Facebook. Trolls are non-existent, as not a one will spend a nickel and put their money where their mouth is to protest on a paid site. You know it. We are steadily moving all Trapping Inc. YouTube videos and podcasts as quickly as time and bandwidth allow. We're tickled and surprised to see how large of library we must move. As well, we are sharing articles on trapping and guns and shooting. Our new TV series, Married to the Hunt, videos are here too. Hours and hours of never before released to the internet hunting and fishing from around the world. TrappingInc.locals.com will be the exclusive home of all Trapping Inc. content from the past and into the future. What else is there to do? Well, there's a forum for everyone to post pictures on and interact. You can message us directly on TrappingInc.locals.com, as well as interact with all the other subscribers. These are all people with common interests. Get in here. This whole venture is about taking the Trapping Inc. TV community to the next level, building a community of shared interest and interacting with all of our friends. Who knows where we can go from here? Just go to locals.com and sign up for a free account. Then search for Trapping Inc. and subscribe for $5 a month. That's it. Go to locals.com to open a free account and then subscribe for $5 a month to Trapping Inc. Help us spread the truth about a way of life and the responsible, ethical management of the wild resources. TrappingInc.locals.com. Now back to the show.
So now I'm getting the tails tanned for free. They charge me the same thing for tanning the beaver with the tails on as they do. So now for making fur products, some of the products I make, I use the belly fur, so I split it up the back. Some of the products I make, I split them up the belly so I can use the back. So I have an option to go either direction. If I'm making a scarf or a headband, the belly fur makes a better scarf or a headband. So I split them up the back. So I got $50 in the tails to start with. And then I also sell the beaver teeth for $5 a piece. So I got $20 in beaver teeth.
So how did you do that tail? Did you?
Okay, when you skin it, you're just going down one leg.
Oh, I see. It's half on the front and
tail.
half on the back. Yeah.
And so I get a set of $50 for a set of coasters out of the tail. And then I make whatever I want to make out of it, whether it be these, I chop them up and make these out of it, or I make the hats I've got up above up there. I think you can, there's a hats right up there. I make those out of them as well too. So, it takes some extra work. You got some extra time into it, but each beaver I catch, I figure is a $300 beaver. So it's back to making it worthwhile, and at least in my way of thinking anyway. So it rains a fair amount here in Wrangell. So if I got a rainy day, I can come in the store and make, $500 or $1,000 worth of product in a day. So.
Well, that's fascinating. I really like the use for the beaver tail. That's cool. And the way that they end up tanning it, it does. I guess it's no harder for them to tan that way than
no.
But leaving it all together, that's
So interesting thing I found about case skinning beaver is they're much easier to flesh and they're a little bit harder to clean skin. Normally I've always clean skinned beaver, but when I went to case skinning them, I found that it was easier to rough skin them and then flesh them on a beam, just like you're fleshing them on an otter board. And so then when you go to board it, is where you really save the time. It takes about 2 minutes to board a beaver. You pull them over a wooden, basically the same as like a big mink board or whatever with a belly. Actually, I use 2 belly boards on it in order to split where the tail is, because I lay a piece of wire over the tail, then just staple the tail down so it stays flat.
Yeah.
And and that's where you really save. I used to always figure a beaver was an hour. That's all it amounted to. You, as long as you accept it's going to take you an hour to put up a beaver, you're good. Well, it shaved about 15 minutes off of that because that's about the time it takes to board. Or in my case, I use always hoop beaver on wire on hoops.
Yeah.
And so, it basically cut 15 minutes of beaver handling off. So instead of an hour, I figure 45 minutes now.
That is fascinating, though. I mean, I have case skinned beaver. I've never done the tail like you do that, but I'm gonna. But I've case skinned them, and I liked case skinning them just because it was so easy. Fleshing was that much easier.
Yeah,
like I found because you'd flesh it in like an otter or whatever, except without having the tail problem that you have with an otter. You can flesh an otter pretty dang fast as compared to fleshing just a regular beaver. When you case skin them though and get them over top of that beam, like you can make some pretty good time.
Yeah, that's why I say it cut a good 15 minutes off of my beaver handling.
Right. Huh.
And then it gives me so many more options too, as far as when I'm making product out of them, I can choose to split it. Occasionally I even split them down the side if I want on the hats to get that ear flap to be right out of the center of the back, which makes a nice looking hat. So you can position it where you want it and what you want to make out of it.
Well, that is very important for you because you make your own product too. You're right from the trap to the cash register, right?
Yeah. What I refer to as fleecing the liberals as they come in the store.
I had a guy contact me from Florida and he wanted a lynx. And of course we have lots and lots of lynx. I have lots of tan lynx down there. But by the time it's $365 just to deal with the US Fish and Wildlife to send a lynx to Florida. That by the time you're done with CITES and everything else, it was like $890 bill. And then and he hasn't paid me for the lynx, and he hasn't paid me, but he was a Democrat, and this was just this was just before the election. and I had to be so careful how I talked and all that. And then he eventually brought it up, and I says, I don't think we're going to get along very well if we start talking about this. But they were fascinated, and finally I said to him, I said, you're not my typical fan or viewer or people that want to buy fur from me, because you just being on that left side and all that. And he says, well, we're not all that way, but I should get a hold of him again and ask him how the gas prices are, or could he put up with a mean tweet every now and then now?
Yeah, I think our country is reaching levels of stupidity that I didn't really think was achievable. So
we had a minister in our government, which is, he's in the governing caucus. So he's a liberal, and he's the minister of who knows. They have so much stupidity. But he brought out a statement. He made a statement that all plastic was toxic and all plastic should be carry special taxes on it, and because we got to go away from taxes. He would have been naked without glasses or a phone sitting there doing that tweet if plastic would have been outlawed. This is how stupid this guy is. Don't get me going. I'll be as bad as Dan Bongino. I'll be spitting on things.
I'll be right there with you.
Well, we should wrap this up. We've been at it an hour and a half, and this has been a great time. We have to get together.
Okay.
I'm
Let me
gonna.
bring my 200 my 200 floating muskrat traps up. We better bring a couple skinners with us. So
Yeah, exactly. One way, yeah. Come trapping on the trap line. Come do muskrats. I got to come see you over there. I think I listened to a podcast you were on with Meat Eater, and you talked about that you actually use a jet boat to do most of your trapping on because your rivers stay open.
Not a jet boat, an airboat, entirely different. It's got an 0540 Lycoming aircraft engine on it.
Right.
And because our rivers, because of the climate that we have here, it oscillates between freezing and not freezing. And the rivers aren't solid enough to run a snowmobile up. So the airboat is neat because it runs in snow. I've never had it in very deep snow yet, but I think it will handle perfectly in deep snow just as well as a 1.5 or 2 feet of snow. But handles wonderfully. And then if the ice breaks up from underneath you, you're a boat and it just heads right back. You just keep on going. And so it's
I bet you have.
You know, it's expensive.
Yeah, but I bet you have some stories. Oh my God, I can already picture this trip in my head. Because they steer kind of like a pinball, don't they? You just got to ricochet off stuff.
No, it's not that way at all. But one thing it does do, if you get on a slab of ice, it'll want to drift sideways on you. The only thing you can do is turn it around and go backwards, you know, basically just flip it around, but it'll flip around in its own length.
I bet there's a whole story in how you figured that one out.
Yeah, there are actually several stories. One thing that's really bothersome is that in the rivers that I trap, my in reach, as far as I can tell, my in reach doesn't even get out. So I carry a rubber raft with me, a little tiny rubber raft that I figure if I get some open leads and that I've got to get over or through or whatever, or you'd be able to just drag down to walk downstream and hopefully be able to get down back to the ocean. And then from when I get to the mouth of the river, then I've still got another 5 miles I got to paddle to get to my trapping cabin. And my trapping cabin's 42 miles from town and that. So, but yeah, but you know, I've got an in reach, and if I do get in trouble with a broken leg or something, you know, hitting the in reach come and get me button, there might not be anybody coming to get me.
So tell everybody how they can find your YouTube. You have some great trail cam videos of your traps in action. I didn't get any trail cam this year because we had waves like this, and I lost 2 cameras as a matter of fact. But anyway, what YouTube can they find you on?
Well, nongriptraps.com, and then on the site for where we sell the traps, there's also a bunch of the videos that I put on there so people can see how they operate and that. Some of them have got a cutaway so you can see the muskrat going in. I've wired the trap stationary so you can actually see the muskrat and how the teeter-totter works and that. And then I've got videos of the small muskrats squeezing out through the bars and getting out and that. And so you can see what's going on with it and that, and how the bump bar works and that type of thing. So
it's a great idea. I can see it being huge for especially the treadle one for golf courses, that kind of stuff, where they really hate muskrats.
What, you know, the real advantage to these traps is for the ability to just take and bait the trap and throw it in the water. You don't have to locate the runs. You don't have to locate the feed beds. None of that's even required. So the ADC guys, or even individuals that have a pond, I sell a lot of traps to individuals that have no trapping experience at all. I provide a DVD with each one of the traps that, you know, gives you a little bit of information of maintenance and a little bit of information of how to set them and that. And basically you just bait them and throw them in the water and, you know, tie them off so they don't float away is about the only requirement.
Oh, I know. They work. They are so easy. They work so well, and like you say, it is great for people to have their own pond. That kind of stuff. I'm impressed with them, and I really recommend anybody that's interested should go watch your trail cam videos on them. That they work really good there. Fursalaska.com is how they get a hold of your fur shop.
Yep.
Okay. And you have lots of good stuff. I know we have lots. I'm not sure what the deal would be if people could try and bring that stuff into Canada, but I know that the folks in the States that watch the podcast that will can reach you and get your product. This has been a blast, Bud, and I really want to do it again. And thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you, Rich. I greatly appreciate all you've done for trapping in the industry. I can't thank you enough.
It started out with me trying to pick a fight, but it kind of went the other way on me.
Yep.
All right, folks. We'd like to thank you for spending your time with us, and maybe we'll see you down the line.